It's said that great art has a special and unique quality that imitations lack. But while it might seem elusive, science can help us to pin it down. The National Gallery's scientific department was founded in 1934. They're now a world leader in the study of the materials and techniques used in painting. In the past, distinguishing the actual works of the old masters themselves from the inferior productions of their workshops, from copies, even from outright fakes, was largely a matter of educated guesswork. But the scientific procedures that have been developed here have now made it more possible than ever before to discover the truth that lies beneath the surface of the National Gallery's paintings. They have various tools at their disposal, but the star of the show is the Osiris camera, which uses infrared reflectography to see through to the level of the underdrawings.
It's amazing. It's like being able to undress paintings.
It is very, very exciting, especially when you're looking at a picture for the first time.
This painting was acquired by the gallery in 1924, believed to be an important Renaissance work by Francia. But a routine investigation revealed something rather different.
When I got this image, I realised there was something wrong with it. The way this underdrawing is done is not the way that underdrawing would have been done in the 16th century.
And what's different about it?
The main thing that's wrong with it is that it appears to be drawn in graphite pencil.
People didn't draw with pencils until the beginning of the 18th century, so that then immediately rips this picture out of the National Gallery's Renaissance holdings, doesn't it?
So that
right?
made me extremely worried, yes. We then looked at it very closely under a stereo binocular microscope. So we were looking at the surface of the paint.
Right.
And discovered that there are actually no genuine cracks in the whole picture. Everything on the surface that looks like a crack has been drawn or painted on. So...
So it's sort of sorry, but I just get the feeling that somewhere a forger is sort of chuckling quietly in his grave, thinking, I fooled them for all these years.
A cunning imitation, and not the only painting with a checkered past. There were more age-old mysteries awaiting me in the conservation department.
Well, this is a picture that was acquired as a Holbein by Charles Eastlake, and there was considerable doubt about that attribution very early after it was acquired.
But he was one of the first directors of the National Gallery.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it was quite embarrassing to have his authority questioned, I think. But anyway...
These questions are now being conclusively answered by scientific investigation. With this painting, they analysed the wooden panel on which it's painted to determine its age.
Recent work on the picture has established that the tree was probably felled about 20 years after Holbein died. Certainly, yeah, felled around the time of his death and seasoned, and the panel itself dates from about 20 years after his death.
So that's fairly categorical. I mean, it's not a fake. It's just simply a case of, as it were, mistaken identity.
That's right. It has an underdrawing and an appearance quite consistent with a painter active in Brussels named Michael Coxey, which is what our curators believe it to be now.
I mean, are there one or two outright sort of screaming fakes? Not to put too fine a point on it.
Well, I'm reluctant to use the word screaming, but the picture behind you is an example of a picture that was probably, almost certainly, painted with an intent to deceive. This is a picture that we believe now to date from the early 20th century, which seems kind of obvious, but it was... apparently the hat is very close to contemporary women's hat fashion in the early 20th century, and we now know that it contains several pigments that were only extant in the early 20th century. It has a tinted varnish, in other words, a varnish applied with a bit of colour to simulate great age.
What Hogarth called smoking a picture with time.
Yes, this was done at high speed.
As well as the occasional fake, they've also found that several paintings were modified to make them more palatable or more saleable. Woman at a Window is a 16th century painting which had been modified for Victorian tastes to a doe-eyed brunette. Restored to its original Renaissance glory, we see a hard-faced blonde with visible nipples. This was thought to be a Holbein until removing some of the surface paint revealed the original portrait by an unknown German artist, modified to make it look like a Holbein and thus more valuable. And sometimes something completely different lurks under the surface.
This painting by the Lenain brothers is on a recycled canvas. Originally, it was a portrait of an unidentified gentleman with a twinkle in his eye. Scientific methods have revealed a lot about the gallery's collection, but there's still much to be said for close examination with the naked eye.
In the summer of 1874, the National Gallery bought two great paintings by Botticelli, or so it was thought, from the collection of the late Alexander Barker. One was Venus and Mars, the other was this picture, an allegory, which at the time was considered to be the more valuable of the two. Indeed, it was regarded as one of the great masterpieces of the world. It's hard to imagine now, because when you look at it even half closely, you can instantly see that this picture could not possibly have been painted by Botticelli himself. Look at the crudeness of the drapery, the badly drawn hands, the glassy-eyed stare. And I think the clinching detail is that rather unconvincing bouquet of roses, which looks, to me, rather more like a bowl of half-melted vanilla and strawberry ice cream.
In the exhibition, the two acquisitions will be shown side by side. This magnifies the failings of an allegory and reveals the true genius of Botticelli.
Now, the Venus and Mars is one of the great masterpieces in the National Gallery's collections. But what is it that makes this a grade A, 10 out of 10, no questions asked, absolutely secure Botticelli? Well, you can't put your finger on any one thing. It's more like a multiple of things. Partly a question of sheer technical prowess. They're just so much more alive. You know, great artist brings everything to life, whereas in the other picture, everything is slightly inert. Everything is rather gone through the motions, if you like. Look at that Venus's hand, or look at what even more, that hand there. Guess who looked at that? Looking at it now, I've just realised. Michelangelo saw this picture. Michelangelo knew this picture. He must have done, because he's based the figure of Adam, probably the most famous painting in all of Western art. He's based that figure on this figure of Mars, because if you just reverse it, and if you imagine that hand raised up and the figure woken up, it's Adam, it's Michelangelo's Adam. The draftsmanship's even the same, and the hand is even the same. So it's a little eureka moment for me.